Fox News alert on the world food supplies. We have been tracking this story for a few days now, and it is getting quite some attention. Food supplies getting very tight. And on the commodity markets, food prices soaring to levels never before seen. It's been gradually showing up in our supermarkets, and you're going to pay for it in your pocketbook. And Fox Business Network's Eric Bolling has been warning about this, and now says it could get much worse. We had you on 2 weeks ago.
Remember these? Yeah, remember this?
And it's happening. What exactly is happening globally that is affecting us in our local supermarket?
Yeah, we're having a confluence of bad things going on right now. Our supplies are already low of food, corn, rice, coffee, sugar, wheat. Supplies low. Now we're finding out the USDA tells us that, guess what, the crops that we're expecting to come out in the next, at least the 2 harvests, may be light as well, which means prices are on the rise, all coupled with, I don't know if you watch it, at the bottom of the screen once in a while you see an oil price go by, $92 a barrel, $91.48 right now as we speak. Those prices are going up. Here's the issue, Megan. When corn prices went up, and rice and wheat prices went up 2 years ago in 2008, it sparked food riots. Now, that was on the heels of a $147 barrel of oil, $4 gasoline. We're only, when I say only, I mean only in relationship to 147. We're only at $92 a barrel. If we were to go back to $147 a barrel like last time, that would push all these prices 60% higher. That's a big problem because these prices are high right now on the wholesale level. They're making their way to the supermarket. Go to the supermarket.
And the thing is, they're not only talking about higher prices, which is a big enough concern, but they're also talking, the World Economic Forum apparently warning that a rising global population, greater prosperity, are putting unsustainable pressure on resources. And they say, Eric, we could be looking at the specter of shortages, which could lead to social, political instability, geopolitical conflict, and irreparable environmental damage. I mean, this is something that could affect us on many levels.
Not could, will affect us. You see this, I'm holding up rice right here, because in 2008, when oil went to $147 a barrel, rice prices spiked to $25 per 100 metric tons. They're right now around 20. If we were to see that again last time, the food riots that you saw on the side of the screen a little while ago would pale in comparison this time, because people aren't as well off. The last time this happened was on the heels of a very robust world economy. We're not there right now. Megan, they were actually giving out credit cards, to buy rice so people wouldn't starve. It's a bad situation, getting worse, and if the globe does grow, like you mentioned, it's only going to push prices substantially.
And now they're also talking about this flooding in Australia, where there's apparently a lot of cattle ranches that have been affected by the flooding.
Right.
And so now importers here in the United States that rely on that meat to fill orders for restaurants and so on are saying they're going to have to look elsewhere. And that may cause some problems because, there's been some problems with importing meat from other places like South America. So now Americans could be affected in more ways than they know.
Let me show you how these things work. Australia is known for producing 2 things, a lot of meat and also a lot of wool. What happens with the meat? Meat prices rise, they've been going up. Wool prices, what else do you use besides wool as a complementary item or a commodity? Cotton. Cotton traded today, the highest it's traded in 147 years of trading, an all-time high. Prices affect each other, so when things like floodings happen in Australia or storms happen elsewhere, they push prices higher, and the bottom line is your grocery bill is going to go up.
Yeah, it's all tied together. Eric Bolling, thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
As you can see, first there's the immediate impact of all this wild weather, then there are the long-term consequences. Supply has been hit, demand continues to soar, especially as a richer Asia grows a bigger appetite. And today figures show that global food prices have risen to a record high, with the cost of everything from sugar to oil surging. The United Nations, who published the latest data, says the prices are now in a, quote, danger territory, even higher than in 2008, when steep increases led to riots in several countries. Here's our chief economics correspondent, Hugh Pym.
Food supply and demand is a truly global issue. So when flooding in Queensland damages wheat crops and sugarcane, that affects prices on world markets. Pakistan's floods have caused huge losses of crops, according to the government, so alternatives have to be found. And all that as Russia continues an export ban after a heatwave damaged harvests. Food prices are a problem again, and in official circles, alarm bells are ringing.
We have left ourselves with very little buffer, and therefore we need to expect, in fact, more volatile situation in the future, as people are fearing we don't have enough reserves, what about this and what about that. So any bad news is going to have more of its normal, let's say, impact on the market.
The UN's own index of global food prices rose rapidly for 2 years up to 2008, provoking food riots in many parts of the developing world. During the recession, the index fell back and then picked up a bit before stabilizing in the middle of last year. But since last August, it's surged back and is now above where it was in 2008 at a record high. Over the last 5 months, cereals, including wheat, have gone up by 6%. Sugar prices have risen by more than 6%. Meanwhile, another commodity, cotton, is up by 15%. And then there's oil. Prices are now in a danger zone after steady rises, according to one industry expert. It all adds up to a big squeeze on consumers in leading economies.
Higher food and energy prices will sap world consumer incomes everywhere, and I think that could certainly have a significant effect, particularly in the rich world where growth is fragile.
The price of rice, critical for many developing countries, is more stable. One reason perhaps why food protests have not been repeated. But with global demand for food as strong as ever and now threats to supply, the stakes are high for economies, both rich and poor. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
Newspapers were reporting that there was a famine in Germany, but that everything was wonderful in Russia. I became very angry and took pictures of the corpses.
Da habe ich die Wut gekriegt und habe fotografiert.
Doch ich habe also noch eine relativ lebhafte Erinnerung an die Zeit in Kiew.
I still have a very vivid memory of that time in Kiev. We were children at the time. My sister was 4 years younger than I. We lived in the consulate like in a golden cage. We weren't allowed to go out in the streets alone during this time. Nevertheless, I remember the misery and the famine very well. I remember seeing bodies everywhere, in doorways, on street corners. Wagons would take them away. They were picked up, thrown in, and driven away.
Aufgeladen, aufgeschmissen.
Some of them were still alive, but they were all thrown on a pile and taken out of the city and thrown into a pit and covered with earth. The children, teenagers, girls, boys, went along stumbling and falling and begging for bread. I couldn't take it. I went home and I screamed and cried hysterically.
We survived thanks to parishioners, the railroad employees who had the chance to travel beyond the borders of Ukraine. And we had neighbors, Soviet officials. They always had food. We came through their garbage cans. We eat rotten potatoes, rotten cabbage and beets, and the scraps of food which they threw away. I am not ashamed to admit it, because it was a matter of survival. I didn't want to die.
When we reached the state farm and met the manager, he hired us to work there. He told us we would work at night, feeding the horses linseed cakes mixed with chopped straw. He said we should do this when people are asleep, because if they were awake, they would eat the horses' fodder. We said, how can we do that? People are more important than horses. But he said, we need the horses to cart the corpses away. They collected the corpses from the houses. A deep sleigh would stop at every house, and the men would ask, "You have any?" "Thank God, we have none." And they'd stop at the next house. Have you got any? Yes. Well, bring them out. But I don't have the strength. Then 2 or 3 young men, themselves with swollen legs, would go into the house, bring out the corpse, and place it in the sleigh. They'd collect 2, 3, 4 a day.
In the spring, when my little sister died, her body lay in the house a whole week. We kept it until Mother came back from the state farm. People would come to our house and knock on the door every day, asking whether we had any corpses. We'd shout, "No, we don't." Then the wagon would continue down.
Half a world away, kinsmen of the famine victims voice protests and form relief committees. Help is offered from Canada, the United States, Switzerland, France, Belgium. Cardinal Initzer initiates relief in Austria. Metropolitan Sheptytsky in western Ukraine. But all shipments of food grind to a halt at the Soviet border. The Soviet Red Cross flatly denies the existence of famine. The hands of the international organization are tied.